Bonjour everyone and welcome back to the Waves of Your Soul. Today I want to share with you a deep dive into two decks, the Penumbra Tarot and the Awakened Soul, both by Ethony. I've had these decks for about a month now. I've been working with them consistently because I wanted to make sure that by the time I present them to you and do my review, it would be an actual review and an actual deep dive and not just my first impressions or unboxing. So we're going to be looking at every single card, but I'll also be sharing my experience working with the deck, some potential pairings, and all of that good stuff. So Ethony got in touch with me earlier this year, asking me if I was interested to be sent a couple of her decks for review, and it was a no-brainer for me to say yes because I already actually own two decks from Ethony. So before we get into those, I'll share with you these ones. These ones, just to be clear, were sent to me for reviews. The next two, I bought them myself with my own money, really as soon as they came out. So I think one was 2020, maybe 2021. I'm very familiar already with Ethony's work, and I just wanted to mention quickly those two before I get into the deep dive of the Penumbra Tarot and the Awakened Soul, because those two are decks that I very much enjoy and some of my most used decks in my tarot collection. The Modern Goddess Oracle, if you've watched my readings before, you know it's one of those oracle decks I'm using constantly. I love the fact that we have lots of different goddesses from all over the world, but I also love the fact that there are also archetype cards, and so sometimes I mix them in, sometimes I take them out, but here you see one of the archetype cards. I absolutely adore this deck, the fact that there's lots of representation, the fact that the guidebook is really good, because if you are not familiar with Ethony's work, she's the queen of guidebooks. Just really enjoy the effort that she puts into the guidebooks. There's always so much to get into, and you'll see that with the two decks I'm presenting to you today. But this one has been a strong favorite for me since 2020, as well as the Modern Love Tarot, which honestly is still to this day for me the tarot deck I go to for anything love related. Like, it's been unmatched. Again, the guidebook is fantastic, and you'll see the same amount of effort put in the Penumbra Tarot. This is definitely the deck I go to anytime I'm asked to do a romantic kind of reading, love kind of reading, but also anything relating family or friendships. I think this is really great for any kind of like interpersonal kind of relationships type reading, and I've found that it really sings for that. Whether you're asking about family, friends, colleagues, or romantic partners, this is really good at analyzing the relations between people. So the Modern Love and the Modern Goddess have both been consistent workhorses for me over the years, and so when Ethony got in touch with me and asked if I was interested in taking a look at her more recent deck, the Penumbra Tarot, and I think at her oldest deck, the Awakened Soul Oracle, it was truly a no-brainer for me. So we're going to be looking at those today. I'm going to leave in the description box timestamps so you can jump around if you're here for the Oracle, if you're here for the Tarot. In the description box you'll find all of the links as to where you can get these decks, obviously, and you'll also find my other social media links and other videos of mine you may want to check out. Let's get into our review of the Penumbra Tarot. So the Penumbra Tarot is a co-creation between Ethony, who wrote the guidebook, and Iris Elizabeth, who is the artist. I believe that both of them are originally from Australia, and you'll be able to see that influence, I think, in the artwork. So the decks are sold directly by Ethony on her website, and obviously I'll leave the link to where you can find all these decks in the description box. The box is this very nice soft matte finish. It opens like this, it's like magnetic, very nice, and the deck comes with a few things. So first we have obviously the tarot deck, we have the amazing guidebook, which, because remember I was telling you in the intro, Ethony is the queen of guidebooks. I stand by that statement. This is a good 340 plus cards. We're gonna take a good look at that. And we also have, as with most of Ethony's decks, a little spread card, and then a little introduction with a little mantra at the back. So really nice touches. I love the fact that there's a little added spread here to interview your deck. I think that's a really cool idea, especially for someone for whom it might be their first deck. I think it's really sweet and useful to have a little spread card like this. So the back of the cards look like this, very gorgeous, this kind of like copper on matte black, and we also have some copper edges, which are very nice. I think it's a nice change from gold, so I quite enjoyed them. The backs are reversible, and if you look closely there's like a ton of little details to get into. We actually have the bee at the center, which is one of Ethony's symbols. We can find it on a lot of her decks. You'll also see a fish, a wand, a leaf, and even a green man face here in the back. So very beautiful back, lots of details, lots of symbolisms, and already you can sense that this deck is going to be very elemental. We have earth, fire, air, and water, and this is definitely a strong theme in the Penumbra Tarot, which I really enjoy, working with the elements. And they're a little bit larger than your regular tarot card. If I take just one of those regular Los Scarabeo decks, for example, because it's typical usually tarot card size, you can see they're a little bit wider and a little bit larger. But in terms of other Ethony's decks, if you have any other one, this is the Modern Love Tarot, and you can see it's the same size. And this is from the Modern Goddess Oracle, and again it's the same size. The Awakened Soul Oracle that we'll look at in a bit does have larger cards. I'll show that with you later. So the production quality is truly gorgeous. I mean, the cardstock feels really nice. It's matte. It makes this beautiful, nice sound. And like I said, the guidebook is super chunky. So much to get into, and we'll look at that in a bit. So I've been working with this deck for about 1 month now. I've been doing lots of different kind of reading. The first thing that strikes me with this deck is first the colors. They're so bright, so vivid, and they feel so alive, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that this deck truly works with spirits and elements. So you'll see there's a strong elemental association in this deck, and the fact that I believe that both these creators are originally from Australia, you can also feel some of that influence, I think, in the work, in the sense of like wanting to work with the lens of the spirits. In the guidebook they mention living on stolen land and working to respect the spirits of the land, and there you can feel that in the deck, this strong ceremonial respect and worship of the spirits of the land. And I found that truly that's the strength of this deck, is the idea of working with spirits, elemental spirits, nature spirits. I'm going to be putting this back in order. I'll share with you every single card, I'll share with you all my experiences, and let's dive into it. We'll start with the major arcana, of course. The first thing that jumped straight off for me for this deck is how bright the colors were. So this is something that to me as a color lover really has a strong appeal. And you can see it straight away from those first 4 cards here. This particular Empress definitely caught my attention because there's something very raw and earthy from her, very like Mother Gaia, and this idea of like opening oneself and sharing one's fruits is so beautiful, so raw, and gives a very vulnerable side to the Empress, which I very much enjoy. And you're gonna see that for some figures depicted in this deck, some of them are humans, some of them are definitely more fae-like or spirit-like. So we can see, for example, the Emperor looks very human, so does the Magician. The Empress, on the other hand, definitely looks a lot more spirit-like, fae-like, and I really enjoy this juxtaposition of like the magical world with the real world, which I think this deck weaves really well. The Hierophant being one of my birth card, it's a card I always look out for because I'm a little bit sick of the traditional one, and I really enjoy this particular depiction. Someone who is a lot more grounded in nature, who almost speaks for nature spirits. We can see a banyan tree in the background, which is one of my favorite trees, and this kind of like Hierophant who doesn't necessarily is there to impart traditional rigid knowledge, but actually is there to be almost like a channel between the nature spirits, Mother Gaia, the universe, and us. I think is very beautiful, so I really enjoy this depiction of the Hierophant. The Lovers is very gorgeous. I think one of my favorite cards. We can see here almost an alchemical version of the Lovers, which I enjoy, with the serpent and the dove. So already you can see the deck is very colorful, which is something I enjoy. I think the art is gorgeous, and like I was saying, what I really enjoy about it is this mix between what feels like real life, what feels like real humans, but mixed with more fae type of creatures. Bring this kind of like liminal space to the deck, which I really enjoy, which is inviting us to almost step into this liminal place in between fae and human, in between magical and day-to-day. And so in my personal readings, that translated into this deck, giving a lot of energy, bringing a lot of like fire and passion, but also a lot of groundedness, because you'll see that this deck definitely is also very much rooted in nature. I love this hermit. I think there's like something very wise and profound about this figure. The Wheel of Fortune I thought was very interesting, the fact that it's in water, but I think it allows us to work on the idea of like going with the flow, on going against the current or towards the current, so I really enjoy this. We have a beautiful death card, very earthy, very grounded. It's making you almost feel like you're invited in a grove, a sacred grove, where ancient beings have come to put their family and friends to rest when it was time. There's something very sacred about this card energetically, which I really enjoy. And finally, I think this devil is really great. It's giving very much like fantasy game kind of villain a little bit. They look like they could get you in trouble, which is definitely something that I look for in a devil. They have to have this alluring side as well as this dangerous side. So I really enjoy this particular depiction. Let's continue with the majors. So something that I definitely want to highlight about this deck is the fact that in the guidebook you have several parts, which we'll look at in a bit. One of the parts is actually the artist depiction and an explanation of why they decided to depict a certain card this way. And I thought that it was brilliant to have this actual like insight into why the art was made this way, because it allows us to really get a glimpse into potentially why they veered off from more traditional depiction, because as you can see, this is definitely not an RWS clone, although it does follow RWS meaning. It's its own interpretation, it adds its own layers, it adds its own world, this magical liminal fey-like world to the mix, which could potentially be confusing for beginners, but because in the guidebook, like I was saying, there's strong explanations as to why each choice were made, and the key symbolism remains. I think it's remained accessible even if you are fairly new to tarot. I absolutely adore this star because it's giving a darker side of the star. The star card is normally very light, very hopeful. Her hand feels like she's channeling some shadows, but transmuting them into light, into beauty, into grace. It feels like she's transmuting shadows into light, and for that particular reason, I think it's giving a kind of a badass star, to be honest. One of the most badass star I've ever seen. It's normally very sweet, gentle, almost fragile. This one looks like it's an active healing. It's an active kind of like transmutation, and I enjoy this particular interpretation because it feels like it's giving us back the power to the situations and to our ability to heal certain things. So I really enjoy this one. Beautiful moon and sun. I love the fact that we have this split here with the two fantastic beings, a kelpie and a griffin. So beautiful, and obviously giving that fantasy magical touch, which if you were my channel before, you know I really enjoy. And then the judgment I thought was very interesting. Instead of having people who raise from the dead, we actually have people like raising from seeds. And so this phoenix-like feature calling forth souls to grow instead of to elevate, you know, in the more traditional Christian kind of view that we're used to the judgment card, where people are coming out of coffins, being called to heaven. Here it's a call for growth and expansion, which is a really interesting view on the judgment, and something that as a reader I can get a lot out of my readings. This was an interesting point of view for the judgment card. So let's move on to the minors, and let's start with the swords. I wanted to put the cards this way because I wanted you to see that even in terms of colors, there is definitely a strong theme for each of the suits. You can see that similar colors were used. For example, for the swords, we have these deep violets and grays. Again, we see a super interesting mix between figures that are looking more human and figures that are definitely more fey-like. We're in this liminal space where magic meets reality, which I really enjoy. It brings a little bit of magic to the day-to-day, which honestly is something I look for in my decks, because it helps bring a little bit of enchantment and magic to the day-to-day. And life is hard enough that it's important, I think, to keep this side of like wonder and whimsy. And yet, even though some of the figures are giving more fae with wings and pointy ears, there's still definitely a lot of depth and a lot of emotions, especially obviously in this swords card. I think the depiction of all of the trials and tribulation that the sword suit represents is really well done here. Again, as you can see, it does follow the RWS meanings closely, so I don't think you would have any issues truly reading this particular deck, even if you are a beginner. This might be one of the most interesting 10 of swords I've ever seen. There's something very special about this. The first time I looked through the deck, this particular creature really caught my eye. It gave me this like haunting feel. We're so used to the traditional 10 of swords, it doesn't feel as heavy now necessarily when I pull it from certain decks, because it's just like, oh yeah, there's a guy with 10 swords stick in his head, in his back. Yeah, we're used to it. This, on the other hand, made me feel something. I felt the angst, I felt the power, but also like the uncomfortableness of this, which I don't even know if that's an English word, but there we go. And so in the guidebook, the artist actually says that when I created this card, I was overwhelmed by the imagery of the landscape swallowed by bushfire. This spirit came to me in this image, hovering in flecked gold, a signal of both death and divinity. I imagine when fire sweeps a land in such a monstrous capacity, they generate their own spirits, an apocalyptic heiress to imbalance, here to craft a new faith for all. How powerful and beautiful is that? The representation of a 10 of swords as like this spirit of the bushfires who destroys everything, but through which afterwards there will be rebirth and new growth. I really enjoyed this particular depiction. Let's move on to the card for the sword suit. And if you've watched my channel before, you know I'm not a biggest fan of renaming of cards, which this deck does, because I am one of those people who can get very confused when the names of the cards are changed. And so that's the one thing I will say that I had to like adjust with this particular deck, was the renaming of the cards. Obviously I can completely respect the creator's perspective, but in terms of me as a reader, it is something that I personally always have to get used to, because I tend to forget. And so here the cards goes like this. Instead of the page we have elements, which I found was very beautiful, but I did find it at first a little bit confusing because it almost looked to me a little bit like an ace. So that's something I had to get used to, but because the aces are called ace, it's actually easy to like make the difference between the two. Knights are agents, which I found the easiest to remember because knights are active. They are always like, you know, the action part of the card. So knight as agents, I thought made a lot of sense. And we also, for all the knights, we have creatures that are in movement, so they are very like coherent and they have this like underlining action vibe to them, which definitely relates to the knights to me, so that was completely fine. And then for queen we have crowns, and for kings we have throne. So that at first gave me a little bit of trouble in terms of remembering. I had to go back to the guidebook and kind of like really get my head around it. One of the creators is that are the crowns, because the crown is actively ruling, is actively embodying the element of that particular suit, whereas the kings are more almost distant, are more like static, are more, I would say, yeah, foundational. And so the throne doesn't move compared to a crown, which moves. And so the way they explain it in the guidebook is that they say the thrones each stand for a legacy, yet there is a distance between their presence and the reality of their rule, as demonstrated by the crown, which must be worn and displayed. So I guess the throne is less tangible and is more from afar, whereas the crown is more up in the mix. And so that's the particular choices that they've given in terms of their renaming. Let's move on now to the pentacles. So the pentacles is actually potentially one of my favorite suits of the deck. I absolutely adore the choices of color. It feels very grounded, yet it feels very magical. We see a lot more spirits, I think, than in the sword suit, which was potentially more human based. Here, even though there's still some human presence, there's a lot of like fae-like creatures, and it just brings us into this like magical forest vibe, which I really enjoy. From the 7 of Pentacles, which is so sweet and cute, it just gives you this little spirit of the forest, inviting you to join but also to be patient. It almost looks like a little shell here. I really love this one. The Eight of Pentacles is looking very fae-like. We have an elf of some sort working. The Four of Pentacles I thought was really interesting. This like being who has been stagnant for so long that actually bark and trees and everything have grown from them, and even little birds have settled their nest on them because they've not been moving for so long that they've actually become part of the landscape. I thought that was very interesting. Also this Five of Pentacles I really like. There's this protection side of the Five of Pentacles, which we don't necessarily always get from other decks. Here it's like, yes, you might be feeling like you have nothing, you might be in lack, but you're still protected and you're still in hibernation mode, and there is still growth there, you just can't quite see it yet. So I really, really like this interpretation of the Five of Pentacles. Let's look at the other card. For the 9, we have this beautiful peacock. For the 10, we have the idea of like moon phases and a tree, the tree potentially representing our family tree and growth. And again, we go back to the renaming of the court card here. We have the page is element, the agent is a knight, which in this case is a kangaroo, which I thought was really sweet because both the creators, I believe, are originally from Australia. So it's nice that they included one of their like national animals there. And we have the crown, so for the queen, and the throne for the king. And here we have a satyr, which truly for me the pentacles is this invitation to step into this magical forest. I love the colors and definitely one of my favorite suits. Let's move on to the cups. Beautiful Ace of Cups. And I love that we go from one fish to two fishes in the two. And the mix of blue and pink is beautiful colors. The Three of Cups, we are seeing the celebration of spirits, elemental spirits. There's so much joy there, so much freedom. The Four of Cups, giving you a little bit of Thoth vibe, which is nice. The Five of Cups, we have the 6, the 7 and the 8. As you can see, the cups is an interesting mix in terms of colors of blues, purples, and again a little bit of greens. Super interesting juxtaposition between what look like normal humans and more magical beings. Here we have some spirits, some mermaids, especially with this beautiful Five of Cups here. I really enjoy the fact that in the artwork, even though some of the beings are not necessarily human, the human emotions that are still present in the card, whether it's joy, whether it's confusion, or whether it's despair, you can still feel the emotion very well through the choice of colors, through the artwork. The Nine of Cups I thought was very interesting. It's a nice change from our regular vision. Instead of seeing like a man with lots of cups behind him, this is this being who has managed to catch and grow their fish. They have managed to build their little world around them. They have managed to create fulfillment around them. The Ten of Cups is giving family, community, very beautiful. The Element of Cups or Page of Cups might be one of the most beautiful cards, to be honest, very gorgeous. Again, for the Knight or Agent, we have a creature, or in this case an animal, which I think the octopus for the Knight of Cups is a good choice. And then we have the Crown for Queen and the Throne for King. Love this particular King of Cups. They look so content, they look so wise, but also there's something very approachable about them. And for the cups, the renaming of the suit was actually the easiest for me to remember. Let's look at the last suit, the wands. So in this case, for this particular deck, the wands are torches. This deck works a lot with elements, so I don't mind this renaming at all. Torches for wands, you know, I always associate wands with fire, so it's something that I completely understand. Here you're gonna see in this particular suit, there'll be a lot more oranges and a lot more like fiery colors, which obviously makes a lot of sense. I love this Two of Torches. I think it might be one of my favorites card of the deck. There's this introduction of this crone-like energy. Is giving a lot of wisdom to the Two of Wands or Two of Torches, which normally can be a little bit spontaneous, and sometimes there's a bit of like usefulness, spontaneity to the Two of Torches or Two of Wands, but here it's like spontaneity that comes from experience, and also the idea of like listening to a wise spirit and taking inspired action from the information, guidance, inspiration that you got from the universe, your guides, your ancestors, whatever you want to believe in. I like this like additional kind of crone energy into this card. I thought that was very beautiful. Now for the Nine of Wands, I want to warn you that for all of my fellow arachnophobes here, this is a difficult card. So I'll put it up here. This is definitely, you know, something that, again, I can see the inspiration from Australian wildlife. As someone who lives on a tropical island and who has to deal with a lot of spiders in the day-to-day life, and someone who's very scared of them, this is definitely a card that's sometimes a little hard to look at. And yet I think for the Nine of Wands is a very interesting concept, to have a spider who has to keep rebuilding their web, who has to keep being very resilient, and kind of like continuously weaving for their survival. It's just that I know for all of those of you out there who are like me, not maybe the biggest spider fans, could be a little bit hard to look at. The Page of Torch, again, what a beautiful card. Honestly, the pages might be some of the most beautiful ones. For the Knight, we have a dragon, makes so much sense as a fantastical creature for a Knight of Wands. I think the dragons is really great. And here for the Crown or Queen, we have a male presenting figure, and for the Throne or King, we have a female presenting figure. So interesting kind of swap into like what we're normally used to seeing. But we still have for the Queen or Crown the addition of the cat, and that helped me to kind of remember that this was the Queen. And for the Throne, we have the two lions here. But I will say that out of all the court cards, maybe the ones were the ones that I struggled the most remembering. Let's look at the guidebook now. Truly, this guidebook is fantastic. I always said Ethony is the queen of guidebook. All of her decks, there's so much effort put into each guidebook, and this one is no exception. First off, for each of the cards, whether it's a minor or a major, we get 4 pages. We get a full page image color of each of the cards, so you can really see the details here. And then the description of each card is split into different parts. So for the legacy, we have Ethony's writing about what the card means upwards, like traditional meanings, about tarot meanings, tarot guidance, etc. Then we have reversed writing, again by Ethony, around what the card would mean reversed. And then we have Eris note, so Eris being the artist, and we have apogee and perigee. So apogee is actually a description of what the card is, so a description of the artwork, and then perigee is actually the inspiration behind the card, so why they made these choices, if there's a story, like how the spirit came to them, if it was a particular like time in the creation of the deck that this card happened, if there's any like background storyline around the inspiration of the card. And personally, I found that reading the perigee part was super interesting, because it really helped me understand the intent behind the deck. It helped me understand the stories behind it, and how this deck is really a combination of lots of spirits that came knocking at the artist's inner door and wanted to be heard. And I thought that was very beautiful. And then finally, for each of the card, we have a song. So that I thought was a really nice addition. It means you could have a whole playlist of the whole deck, and as a music lover, I really enjoy this association. We also have at the beginning of the deck, obviously, some little instructions on how to connect with the deck, which gives you a little like blessing your tarot deck kind of ritual you could want to check out. There's also some activities like building your tarot book, or little like journaling activities to connect with your deck, which I thought was really great. And then you have some awesome spreads here by Ethony, which I really enjoy. There's about 5 or 6. I won't show them all to you, but really, really amazing guidebook. Let's pull a card actually, and I'll read to you what it says. Let's see. 8 of Swords. Okay, so I'll read to you the guidebook for the 8 of Swords, just so you can get a feel on how it reads. Obviously, if you don't want to hear my French froggy accent, you're welcome to pause and read it yourself. So for the Upward or Legacy, we have, you have found yourself trapped in your current situation and not sure how to get out. Maybe events out of your control have been set in motion, or your power has been taken away. You were unable to move forward. Shift your perspective to what you can do instead of focusing on what you can't. If you have been putting limitations on yourself or for others, it's not helping the situation. Start to see the possibilities and don't hold yourself or other people back. You will be pleasantly surprised with the results. Then we have the reverse meaning. So this is a sign you have had enough and it's time to set yourself free. Don't get frustrated with the people around you for their perceived lack of support. They have been trying. Love this. Actually, so interesting view on the Eight of Swords. You haven't been willing to take out the required action to get yourself out of the bindings you put on yourself. It's time to stop self-sabotaging any healthy and positive efforts you make in life. Tell your inner critic to shut up and liberate yourself. I love this particular guidance. Ethony's writing is always like no bullshit, and it's a vision of tarot I really enjoy. It's not gonna cuddle you, but it's gonna tell you the tea, and I'm here for it. Then we have the artist note. So for apogee, which is like the depiction of the card, we have, you are surrounded by threat and you are bound, but escape can be found easily. If inclined, you could slip the smooth rope from your wrist and walk away. No harm, no foul, if inclined. And then perigee, which is the inspiration behind this particular artwork. For this card, I was inspired to use the first person point of view to emphasize the querent as the one whose action is needed to rectify the situation. I used the photo of my own hands as a reference. I wanted to position the viewer to feel as if they are looking down on their own hands and be directly presented with the outcome of the next moment. And then the song is Far Away from Jose Gonzalez. Love, love, love. Great guidebook, lots of different bits to get into. Absolutely a joy to read this. I really enjoy reading the guidebook cover to cover. I enjoyed working with this deck with the guidebook and obviously without the guidebook. And so let me just quickly get into pairings very quickly. Some pairings I enjoyed working with this particular deck. I really enjoyed this with Tarot of the Sweet Twilight, more ethereal feel of it, and the fact that it kind of takes you into another world, in another dimension. And I thought that these two were fantastic together, especially because the Penumbra Tarot again makes you feel like you're stepping into this twilight zone, this liminal space, and there's a very similar feel from the Tarot of Sweet Twilight, which invites you to this liminal space. The choices of colors are really great, and the way that they responded together was so great. So I enjoyed this particular pairing very much. I also really enjoyed pairing this particular tarot deck with soul cards. For any of you out there who love soul cards like me, the fact that the Penumbra works a lot with spirits of nature or spirit of the land, I found that it really went well with soul cards in particular, because it gave this, like, again, liminality vibe from it. They are so great together, and honestly that's my favorite pairing that I found for these two. There's something very profound about this tarot deck that really resonates with the depth of the soul cards. Overall, in terms of the type of reading, I ended up using the Penumbra ways over the months. I tried everything. I did some more day-to-day reading, like practical mundane things. I did some relationship readings. I did some spiritual readings. For me, I found that it sang really well for a lot of different things. It did, for me, seem to be a deck that really more wanted to work in terms of larger questions though. Even though it was great for day-to-day, I did find that if it was around bigger themes like what is my purpose, where do I go next, things like that, helping you to make big choices, I found that this deck worked really well for that. And I think it's because of its connection to potentially nature, to spirits of the land, to something larger than us. It really allowed for me to tap into this like connection to spirit in general. And so I found that for those types of reading, this worked really, really well. So that's my review for the Penumbra Tarot. Overall, I'm super pleasantly surprised. This is not a deck that I originally had heard a lot of, so I was very curious to like make my own opinion, and I can definitely say that after a month of using it, I'm super pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed the depth it had, I enjoyed the invitation to step into another world, and overall it was a great experience, especially because I enjoyed the guidebook so much as well. Let's move on to the Awakened Soul Oracle. So the Awakened Soul Oracle is, I believe, one of Ethony's first decks. It's been out for quite a while. I feel like this was out before the Modern Goddess and the Modern Love Tarot. I had always had my eye on this particular deck, and so when Ethony offered to send this for review, I was super excited to get my hands on it, because this is one I always was like kind of eyeing, because I knew that the artwork really appealed to me and I was very curious to see how it would read for me. So as you can see, the box looks like this. Again, we have the bee symbol of one of like Ethony's symbol here. It's magnetic box. It has this very nice soft matte finish. It's created and written by Ethony, but the artist is by Daniel Mulligan. So again, I'll leave the link to where you can find this down below. And again, we have a couple of cards. We have another one of those interview cards, interview spreads, which I really appreciate. Think that's so great that they include that. And then we have a little word from Ethony, and we have a quote from Carl Jung: who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. So this is a 50 card oracle deck, which I love. I mean, I'm always someone who enjoys when oracle decks have more cards. The more cards the better, so 50 feels like a really good size, and it comes with obviously a great guidebook. Always interested in this deck, first off because I thought that the artwork was very beautiful, and second because I found that the keywords were expensive. Like we have some simple keywords, dream, we have here devotion, family, simple, straight to the point, and so I really was curious as to how this oracle deck would work, both as a clarifier on its own, paired with tarot. I wanted to try it all, see how it worked, see how it sang, and I can honestly say that this didn't disappoint. I absolutely first really enjoy the artwork. I think it's this beautiful mix of modern day-to-day life with magic. There's this beautiful mix between day-to-day and fantasy, which I really enjoy. We have some representation here. We have different people from different ethnicity, different ages, which is something I always look forward to in decks. I feel like I could read with anyone with this and they would enjoy it. It feels very accessible, very approachable, and the choices of keywords and matched with the artwork is really interesting. Like for compassion here, we have the orangutan and this like climate change, destruction of forest concept. We have connection with yogi, so there's definitely some beautiful, accessible, interesting, expensive keywords, which makes this deck feel very easily to pick up. Like this is great, I think, for anyone, whether you're a beginner, this is your first oracle deck, or whether you're an experienced reader, because of the fact that it feels so intuitive and feels so easy to use. Obviously the guidebook is also helping you to understand the meaning, which is great, and we'll get into the guidebook in a bit, but I think even anyone who would never have used an oracle deck before would be able to pick a card, see the artwork, see the keyword, and be like, okay, Gaia, yeah, I know who that is. Mother Earth, I understand. Or desire, okay, I understand what's happening in this situation. So this feels very accessible, very easy to use, which is great. And honestly, this has been so great to use on its own, but also as paired with tarot. So on its own, the fact that there's 50 cards, you can really do big spreads with this. You can really use this almost like you would a tarot deck, do larger spreads, maybe even I use this for like a month ahead for myself and pulled like a few cards for each week. It was reading really well because of the fact that there's a good balance between lighter keywords and more shadow keywords. So we have, for example, it's not a lovey-dovey kind of deck. We do have some darker concepts, which I think is really great, because that's always something I look forward in my decks, is balance, especially for oracles. There's a place and a time for oracles that are gonna cuddle you, but for oracles that are, I think, with more cards that are larger like this, and if you want to use them in the same way you would a tarot, it is very, I think, great to have this like balance of keywords, because it's a better representation of actual life, right? Life is not always love and light. So I loved the fact that there's a wide variety of keywords. Like we have challenge, forgiveness, we had the labyrinth, but we also have obviously much lighter concepts like fun, family, love, and all of that. On its own, this is great, but obviously paired with tarot as in clarifier, for example, also works really well. I paired it with the Penumbra tarot, which I was just showing you earlier, which is great. I paired it with other Ethony's decks like the Modern Love. I paired it with the Light Seers, like all of my modern decks, and this felt really great. But I think this would work also really well for more fantasy decks, because like I said, there's this interesting mix between day-to-day life life, here song with someone doing a meditation, and the shapeshifter, which feels a lot more or magically inspired, and it just feels very comforting, very nurturing. Like the solitude card, for example, solitude could be a keyword that maybe some people avoid. It could feel like almost a punishment, but here the person looks so happy to be alone. Even though there are people having fun in the back, they seem much more content to be in nature with animals companion. Like it gives another layer to maybe a keyword that could seem a bit daunting for some. Here actually feels a lot more empowering. We have mantra card here. I love this one because actually the beads have the actual mantras. We have I am safe, I am seen, I am smart. Depending on the day that you pull this card, one of the mantras might stick out to you more, which I think is an interesting vibe. For the sovereignty, I love the addition of the three goddesses here. We have Aphrodite, Athena, and Artemis. Three of my favorite goddesses to work with, so I love that there's an inclusion here of Greek mythology. For surrender, we have whales. Whales are some of my favorite animals, so this is one of my favorite cards. We have treasure, and so overall, honestly, this didn't disappoint at all. And this is a deck that was always like on my radar and that I had high expectations for, and honestly, it didn't disappoint at all. I think the choices of keywords, the artwork, which is very beautiful, the guidebook, which is really empowering, we'll look at it in a bit. And so if you're looking for an oracle deck that would pair really well with your modern decks, but that would act as well on its own as being paired with tarot, I think this is a great contender. That the cards are actually a little bit larger this time, so they are a little bit larger and longer. So if I go back, for example, to the Penumbra tarot and pick a card from that, just to give you a little idea, here you can see that the awakened soul is slightly larger and actually taller, so that's something to be aware of. Just for those of you out there who have little hands, it might be a little bit harder to manipulate the oracle than the tarot, but in terms of production quality, it feels really great. The cardstock is matte, the backs are totally reversible and very beautiful. The sides are silver edged, and in terms of shuffling it, I just shuffle it that way. The card slides really well, so honestly, production again 10 out of 10. The box is beautiful, the cards are great. And in terms of the guidebook, first off, I thought it was very interesting because we have a lot of spreads in this particular guidebook. And that's something we don't always see with oracles. Sometimes spreads are mostly shared for like tarot, but here we actually have spreads for oracle, which I thought was great. We have here some tips around how to cleanse your deck or charge your deck, how to connect with your deck, which I thought was really interesting. And another part that I really enjoyed was this particular Awakened Soul challenge. It's a 13-day challenge that Ethony created, where you have one journaling question every day and you pull a card from the oracle and you work through this particular like 13-day prompt. I actually did it all at once because sometimes I can be a bit mental like that, and it was great. Like I really enjoyed this particular way to connect with the deck. 13 prompts, 13 questions. It was a great journaling session for me. Really enjoyed the fact that there was as much effort put in this oracle deck guidebook than someone would put in a tarot deck guidebook, and that's not always the case in terms of spreads, in terms of like ideas of prompts and stuff like that. Really interesting. In terms of the card, for each card you have a black and white depiction of the image. You have some symbol explain the keywords. So you have the Awakened Soul story, which explains to you the artwork, like why the artwork is this way, and explains to you the symbolism between the artwork. Then the awakened meaning is actually what it means if you pull this card, like the guidance, what the actual message of the card is for you to apply to your oracle reading or to your daily prompt or whatever it is that you're doing. Then you have a shadow meaning with keywords, so this would be if you wanted to use it with reversals, or if in your spread that you're using you have a more of a like blockage or shadow side of the card. Then for every single card you have an affirmation, and finally you have a journaling prompt. And that is something I always look forward to in oracle decks. If we have mantras, if we have journaling prompts, it allows us to do some journaling or even to start from this card and build spreads around. And I love this particular way to like connect with the cards that way. Again, if you're familiar with Ethony's writing, you know this is a no bullshit kind of guidance where it tells you exactly what you need to hear, almost like a big sister way. I think this is how I would describe Ethony's writing. I really enjoy, and I think is very relatable for a lot of people. So great guidebook. I really enjoyed reading what it had to say, and I really enjoyed working with this particular oracle deck, and this is definitely going to be an oracle deck I continue to work with. I'm so excited to be using both of these decks in future Pick a Card, because I think that the very strength of these decks is that they feel very accessible, approachable. The Penumbra Tarot feels more magical potentially and fantasy. This one feels more rooted in day-to-day life, and yet, like I said, it's definitely sprinkled with some magic. To wrap up the video, let me quickly show you what they look like together. So we have the Awakened Soul Oracle here and the Penumbra Tarot here, and just while I finish kind of like my thoughts, I'll show what they look like together. So overall, honestly, I've enjoyed massively both of these decks. I would say that you would really enjoy the tarot if you are someone who enjoys decks that take you into another world, that help you to potentially open your horizon. If you are not afraid to like move away from potential like very traditional type of depiction of tarot, but if you still want something that is very rooted in the RWS meanings of the card, and obviously if you're someone who enjoys working with spirits, with fairies, then this would be a fantastic deck for you to work with. For the Awakened Soul Oracle, this is truly a very accessible, beginner friendly. There's this feeling of like accessibility, very easy to pick up with this deck. I really enjoy the fact that there's a lot of cards, that there's a great variety of keywords here, that the artwork is also very intuitive. If you want to use this without the guidebook, it's no problem at all. Although of course the guidebook is fantastic, and I really enjoyed especially the prompts that were given in there and the mantra, so that was a really nice addition. Of course, I want to thank Ethony for sending these decks to me for review. I really appreciate it, but I do want to say that even though this was sent to me for review, all the thoughts are my own. I'm not sponsored, I'm not paid, are still my personal opinions, my personal thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into looking at both those decks. Oh, look at that, Forgiveness and Ten of Swords. What a great combo, and I think that's a great one to finish on. So thank you so much if you've made it this far. Again, I'll make sure to leave in the description box where you can find these decks. Let me know in the comments if you have these decks, if you are interested in them, if they're not your style. We can just talk about them in the comments. I want to thank you so much for being here, and until my next video, I'm sending you so much good vibes, and keep navigating the waves of your soul. Bye!